scripture lesson for today comes from Luke 19th chapter, and I'll be reading the 1st through the 10th verse. And it says, he entered Jericho and was passing through it. A man was there named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he could not, because he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed the sycamore tree to see him, because he was going to pass that way. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and saw him. Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. So he hurried down and was happy to welcome him. All who saw it began to grumble and say, he has gone to be the guest of one who is a sinner. Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, look, half of my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone, I will pay back 4 times as much. And then Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek out and to save the lost. I want to talk for just a few minutes from the topic, free your mind. Free your mind. You know, I'm blessed to have a job I love to do every day, my 9-to-5 job. The company I work for at least tries to live into values that I respect and share in many ways. Things like respect for individuals, inclusion and diversity, concern for social justice and the environment. Even though I know that there are probably people who work there who play lip service to these values, at least the company code, the code of conduct, keeps them in line from 8 to 5 every day. But one of the things I love most about my job is that it's 99% remote. I say 99% because I've worked there almost 2 years and I've only been in the office one time. I spend lots of time on Teams calls, but even then, we're not required to turn our cameras on. So I haven't seen most of these people that I talk to every day. We just have to have a picture that displays who we are. It represents us. You know, mine actually represents what Kathi Martin looked like 5 or 6 years ago, but who's to say anything about it? They don't know. That's the good thing about that work environment. The anonymity that levels the playing field a bit, because people, you know, all people, we all make judgments about who we are based on embedded prejudice and points of view. We judge based on age and race and gender and weight and other physical characteristics, disability, ethnicity, and the list goes on, these ways that we judge one another. We make assumptions based on what someone else said or what someone who looked like you did. And it works both ways. We either think less of someone based on these things, or we undeservedly put people up on pedestals. The text for today gives us a couple of perspectives on the impact of prejudice and the reasons to confront it. The text for today comes out of the gospel of the person we refer to as Luke. We've stayed in Luke for the past few weeks because I've been following the lectionary. Many of the stories we find in the Gospels have parallel stories in the other Gospels, but the story in our text for today is only found in Luke. It's a familiar story for those of us who have spent any time in Sunday school. You may have learned a little song with the words, Zacchaeus was a wee little man was he. He climbed up on the sycamore tree for the Lord he wanted to see. I don't know if they sang that in this country, but I know when I was in Bermuda, when I was little, we used to sing this Zacchaeus song. And for years, whenever I heard this song and heard this story, my mind envisioned a silly little man who didn't have much going on for him, who wanted to see Jesus. I often wondered why he wanted to see Jesus so badly. The text didn't say he needed healing or anything. It said he just wanted to see who Jesus was. But this time, as I studied the text, I found something interesting. The text says he was trying to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he could not because he was short in stature. Look at that again. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he could not because he was short in stature. This is one of those times when names would have made the statement more clear, because he was used 3 times in that sentence, but they were talking about 2 different men. Traditionally, we've heard the interpretation that has been passed down for years and years, the traditions that have said Zacchaeus was trying to see who Jesus was, but on the account of the crowd, Zacchaeus could not because Zacchaeus was short in stature. But what if the pronouns actually mean, now get this, what if it actually means Zacchaeus was trying to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, Zacchaeus could not because Jesus was short in stature? Would that mess with your embedded belief of who Jesus was? And it sounds like a strange thing, like I'm making this up, but I'm not, because it was really a consideration for the early church. The Greek text and most of the English translations of the early church permit, because he was short in stature, to refer back to Jesus, not to Zacchaeus. Actually, an early Jewish critic of Christianity commented on Jesus's short stature as being contrary to what one expected of the Son of God. So what went through your mind when presented with this possibility that perhaps Jesus was a little short guy? Does it matter? Did it make a difference to you? He still taught and did everything that we read in the Gospels. He just maybe did it from a lower perspective. He was still someone who lived his beliefs boldly and went against the grain with his politics of compassion in a society where the politics of purity was the norm. An adverse opinion or leaning formed without just grounds or before sufficient knowledge, or an irrational attitude of hostility directed against an individual, a group, a race, or their supposed characteristics. Most of us don't want to own up that we have these things, that these 2 definitions of prejudice are part of our personality. We don't want to own up to that, especially those of us who are part of groups who are sometimes marginalized through the race or gender. You know, we could possibly think that prejudice is something we don't need to consider as perpetrators. We only need to consider it as victims. But the truth is, all of us consciously or unconsciously have our biases. We weren't born with prejudice. We learned that along the path of our lives, one way or another. We weren't born this way, but we picked it up bit by bit from our parents, from our friends, from our teachers, from the people around us, from TV, from society at large. And truthfully, we'll probably always have them. But it's better to acknowledge it. Acknowledge that if we want to be able to transcend it, we have to be able to first see it. Even in the text, Jesus gives an example of looking beyond preconceived notions of people. Being an educated man steeped in his historic Jewish scripture and Jewish traditions, he knew what was acceptable and what was considered taboo. But still, he chose to transcend those barriers. By going to Zacchaeus' house, he went against societal norms because, like many have learned throughout history, all laws are not just. And frequently, the laws themselves are born out of somebody else's biases and somebody else's prejudices. So Jesus decided to go against the taboo. And he went to the home of not just any old tax collector, but the text says he was a chief tax collector, meaning Zacchaeus was one who would be considered ceremonially unclean or socially ostracized or politically treasonous. Zacchaeus probably even cheated people out of more than what they owed, yet Jesus still saw him and said, I am coming to your house. Jesus saw him. If he was up in the tree, it wasn't like he just bumped into Jesus. Jesus intentionally saw him. And being seen by Jesus changed Zacchaeus. Having his humanity affirmed caused Zacchaeus to find it in himself to do things that connected him with others. The text says, he said, look, half of my possessions, Lord, I'll give to the poor. And if I've defrauded anyone, I'll pay them back 4 times as much. The text doesn't say Jesus asked him to change or Jesus extended conditions that would have led to his salvation. Jesus just saw Zacchaeus and went to his house, and Zacchaeus made his own decision to be able to see others once he realized he had been seen by Jesus, rather than being judged through stereotypical lenses. Jesus was able to take that moment and make it a moment of transformation, saying, if Jesus could see me with all that society says about me, if Jesus can see me, then maybe I can see others. Maybe I could see the poor. And once he realized that he was not being judged through stereotypical lenses, he was able to see the poor as people who deserve to be treated fairly and with respect. The text didn't say he gave up being a tax collector, but something changed in Zacchaeus that made a human connection between him and another human being. And it opened him to be able to see others as humans to connect with. So who in our lives have we not seen? Who have we devalued due to characteristics like they were too short or they were too old or whatever our embedded biases may be? What story in our lives do we need to take another look at? Because maybe we looked at the story like it was Zacchaeus who was short, when maybe it was actually Jesus. Who have we misinterpreted in our life? Have we demanded others to live into an unrealistic image or be someone or something that they're not in order to suit our expectations of what we think they need to be to earn our respect? You know, this was a basic little message, but it's an important message for our time. We live in a very divided world, very divided, more divided than I had ever imagined we would be. We used to be divided by black and white, but these days, especially in the United States, we're divided more by red and blue. These divisions are not just uncomfortable, they're downright dangerous. And as long as we see one another through the lenses of conscious or unconscious, embedded and possibly erroneous assumptions and traditions and opinions, we may not allow our humanity to connect with the humanity of others. It's time for us to do some house cleaning. Like the old song En Vogue recorded about race many years ago, we need to free our minds and maybe the rest will follow. Let's not get so caught up on whether someone is short or tall or young or old or gay or straight or Democrat or Republican. What we need are human beings who can connect with other human beings and work together to save a world so our children and our grandchildren will have a world in which to love and live. Actually still have a world in which to love and live. I'm not saying we should blindly trust or accept the bad behavior of anybody. I'm wise enough to know that corporate codes of conduct and that even the law of the land won't stop some people from doing evil, hateful, or selfish things. We should stay wise enough to protect ourselves from their attacks. And we should be bold enough to call people on the things that they do, while not allowing the biases and the downright evil of others become the law of the land or our way of being. I'll always remember the words of Audre Lorde, where she said, "For the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. They may allow us to temporarily beat him at his own game, but they will never enable us to bring about genuine change. Racism and homophobia are real conditions of all our lives in this place and time. I urge each one of us here to reach down into that deep place of knowledge inside herself or himself and touch that terror and loathing of any difference that lives there. See whose face it wears, and then the personal as the political can begin to illuminate all our choices. We need to look inside, see what's in there, see what's going on inside of us, see whose opinions are driving our choices, see whose opinions are driving our fears, see whose perspectives are causing us to speak and act and do what we do. Politically, interpersonally, and individually, we're only responsible for our own actions. So we're the ones that have to do the work to free our minds from other people's pollutants and instead let love be the energy which fuels and feeds and builds the choices that lead us forward and help us to make the decisions that will allow us to create a better world. I invite you today, I implore you to free your mind of the mess that causes our world to be ugly sometimes and free up the space where love is allowed to shine. Thank you for listening.